All right, welcome to Halitics. Never fails. I thought we had the countdown going, but we didn't, but I'll just cut that part out. Arlen with us on Halitics today. It is Tuesday, the 11th day of March. Arlen, how are you?
I'm doing just fine, but I'm kind of staggered over what's going on in the news. Apparently, there's quite a bit going on, and people are starting to panic a little bit, I think. At least
well, you mentioned that. I was kind of at flummox when you said that, Arlen. I hadn't really been focused on it, but I did check the stock market numbers. They were down, but it didn't strike me as some massive collapse. But the New York Times is reporting that there does appear to be a market crash right now.
Yeah, I think they're worried about a worldwide recession. I mean, you can't just say, today was bad. Today was bad, but the last week or so has been horrible. So that we're certainly into recession territory, and who knows, it could get even worse than that, especially if the powers that be, Trump and Musk and all that, don't seem to know what they're doing. That spells trouble for the whole world, really. And
well, I don't know if a market drop of 10% defines a recession. I think generally a recession is when the economy is not growing, when it's not generating jobs. There's a question between a depression and a recession. As I understand it, a recession means the economy is not growing. So I don't know that this augurs a recession. There's obviously certain Trump policies that have been announced that concern people, but I think the market may still be up since the November election. I'm not really sure. I think it's a little premature. I would just say that it may be premature to declare the economy in free fall or in a recession or even there being a market crash at this point.
Well, it looks like that to me. I think there is a definition for recession, and I'm pretty sure we're in it. And I think, for the year, I bet we're also down. I think this is really big right now. And Elon Musk especially is losing lots of money. His Tesla, stock has crashed, and a lot of his other investments have crashed. So, I should look and see just how much, the numbers in the last few days, how much down the market is. But I think it's down quite a bit.
Oh, I thought I saw 10% when I just looked at the Times, but I could be wrong. I do have the definition here of a recession. It is a period of economic decline, which is what I had said, during which trade and industrial activity are reduced and a fall in the GDP occurs over two consecutive quarters or two successive quarters. So again, a contracting economy. I don't know that we have numbers that have come out. Maybe they suggest that. I don't know. I haven't been following it super closely, but this certainly does follow a period of very rapid growth or very rapid increases in the stock market indices. So I'm not sure that this drop of 10% qualifies again as a recession. It may indicate though that the economy is shrinking, Arlen. I'm not sure about that.
I think it's a lot more than 10%, frankly, but I don't have the numbers in front of me, so I can't say for sure. But it's I think the important thing is that people are starting to see that Trump and Musk don't really know what they're doing. This whole idea with tariffs has turned into a disaster. And, like I say, the stock market is not taking it well. And I think there's going to be some panic in the air, and there is panic in the air now. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, the tariffs haven't really been imposed. They keep being delayed. So I don't know really. There certainly does appear to be a fear in markets, a fear among, the brokers and the traders that the tariffs could lead to a reduction in economic activity. I think that's right. They probably will cost some profits because, they'll lead to higher wages. The reason we manufacture so much overseas is because labor is cheaper there, much, much cheaper there. And if you force companies to pay workers a higher wage, their profits, at least in the short run, will drop. So that is an issue, and people will buy less, right? Prices go up, then the law of supply and demand is demand drops when prices rise. That's the deal. I don't know how much the average American really cares that much or is impacted. I mean, I think people follow the stock market. I don't know that the voters for Trump are that concerned about, at least the blue collar voters that the Democratic Party has lost. But again, I could be wrong, and his numbers have dropped, Arlen. He is less popular now than he was a couple of months ago in any event.
Yeah, and you got Elon Musk talking about that Social Security and Medicare should be eliminated. That's panicking a lot of people, I would think. Think of all the people who have Social Security that depend on that for their income. I mean, they're probably very scared. And, Medicare and all those things.
Well, are you, Arlen? You get Social Security. Are you concerned that there's going to be cuts or reductions in payments? Or the growth in the payments will decline? Because I think my mother-in-law does get a bigger check this year than she did the previous year. It wasn't much of a jump, but it was a bit of an increase. So where do you stand on that issue?
Well, I've always said that I didn't think anybody would touch Social Security because it would be politically so dangerous, I think. But now I'm not so sure. When you have somebody like Musk saying, that it's a Ponzi scheme or whatever, then you've got some big problems. I think Trump may have to separate himself somewhat from Elon Musk for a change, and we'll see what happens after that. I mean, it's premature to say anything about Social Security and what's going to happen to it, but if Musk has his way, we could have some big problems there.
Yeah, I think this is an issue the Democrats should make hay out of. They should really focus on the concerns that the American public rightly have. I mean, we're already living in very fraught times for so many Americans. Barely so many can even get by. And, to talk about cutting Social Security or even reducing the growth is in the payments is understandably terrifying, and it's a betrayal to our seniors. So I think, and those who are soon to be seniors. So I agree, this is an issue the Democrats need to really focus on. That said, and yes, you're right. Musk did say he absolutely called it a Ponzi scheme. He's 100% wrong. It is not a Ponzi scheme. It's a critical tool in fighting impoverishment for the seniors, and to protect us. But Trump has said, whether you believe him or not, he has in fact said he is not going to touch Social Security. So you can believe him or not, I don't know, but that's the case.
If you could believe anything Trump says, well, and I certainly don't, and I think people should have learned by now that they shouldn't trust anything he says. He never tells the truth. And another big factor, I think, is remember how he promised he's going to stop inflation and bring it down after one day. And inflation is going way up now, and that doesn't look good either. Price of eggs, price of cars, price of gas. It forebodes some bad times ahead, I think. So
well, I agree with you there. When Trump says, I don't know, did he say he was going to fight inflation? I guess he was. He was certainly very quick to blame inflation on Harris Biden. Was without the economic numbers are very hard for presidents to control. They can do a few little things. I certainly would argue that Harris Biden were not good for the economy, but that was a ridiculous assertion by Trump. That said, just as it's ridiculous for Trump to blame Harris Biden for inflation, I think we have to be somewhat circumspect when we, do the same thing and say, oh, well, look how he's causing inflation, because, again, politicians have limited ability. But I would argue that what the Democrats do need to do, Arlen, is present a different vision. Say, well, this is what we will, when you elect us, this is what we'll do differently. Because otherwise they're just carping and pointing fingers. That may be good enough, but, in terms of politics. But for the American people, I think we deserve better. I think we deserve a party that says, this is what we stand for. This is what we'll fight for.
Well, I think you have to consider something else. It's true that presidents and don't actually have a lot of power normally over the economy. But I think with all the drastic things that Trump and Musk have been doing lately, I think they play a big influence on what the market is looking at, and all the talk about the tariffs and all that. I think I think you could blame the administration for what's going on right now economically, and I think Trump will pay a price, and Musk is going to pay a price.
All right, Arlen, here, I just put the numbers up on the screen for you. This is from CNBC 20 minutes ago. I don't know, maybe there's been a further drop. But as of 20 minutes ago, S&P 500 down 9.5% from all-time high on Feb 19, and Dow Jones down 8.3%. The NASDAQ composite is down 14% from its all-time high. That is an index that's especially tech-heavy. So We've seen the tech stocks falling more rapidly than industrials, which obviously comprise the Dow Jones Industrial Averages, tend to be older stocks, big, well-known AT&T type, GM, and then the S&P 500, the largest companies, less tech-heavy than the than the composite, but more so than the.
By the way, Hal,
Dow Jones.
I don't see anything on the screen. I don't see a picture.
Oh, thank you for letting me know, Arlen. Sorry.
There we go.
Now I should see
there we
it.
go.
I have to press a million buttons, including, which I did not do, my button to start the countdown timer. So, Arlen, all that said, yes, we are seeing the market fall. I do want to see Democrats push a progressive economic message. We'll have to agree to disagree on tariffs. I agree Trump has, he's very haphazard, and he hasn't even imposed them to a significant degree. And yet the market has obviously been spooked by the fear that workers might have to be paid a little more, that we might actually have to manufacture. Because all tariffs do is make imports, is impose a fee on importers. That's what a tariff is. It's a fee on an importer. And importers are bringing goods into this country because they're cheaper to make overseas generally, or maybe you can't make them here. Like I always give Scotch versus bourbon. You can't make Scotch in the United States. It has to be made in Scotland, or it's not Scotch, I guess. Although that's not even true. Japan apparently makes real Scotch. I don't know. Bourbon you have to make in Kentucky. Bourbon can only, or at least the United States. So it gets confusing. I don't really even understand all that. But the bottom line is, the point of tariffs, the reason you impose tariffs is to incentivize domestic manufacturing. That seems to me a good thing and a good idea.
Yeah, well, Trump has been believing in that for years, maybe decades. He's a big proponent of tariffs. But I think what's bothering people, besides that, which a lot of people don't like the idea of tariffs at all, is that he keeps changing, going back and forth, saying, oh, well, let's halt this tariff and increase this tariff. And, people are just, they don't know what's going on. They don't know what to predict. They're worried about the inconsistency. And, those guys in the market certainly doesn't like inconsistency. It doesn't, like instability. So, the market is not seeing what they want to see. And that's why they're going down so fast.
Well, I agree with that. I agree with that in several different ways. One, in terms of good policy, you should be consistent. You should say, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to do. And then presumably you do it unless you have a very good reason not to. Trump has delayed a couple of times imposing the tariffs. I don't know what his reasons were. I understand that he has a lot of advisors, obviously, who will be hurt, right? Because the billionaire class loves free trade. The billionaire class has been enriched by NAFTA and CAFTA and all the deals that Clinton and the Bushes and everyone else pushed. So they're the ones who have the power. They're the ones who have Trump's ear. They're the ones he rubs elbows with. They don't like tariffs. That said, and I'll say it over and over, tariffs are the right policy. We should have tariffs. Tariffs are a critical tool to protect the working class. But you're right. It's not being imposed well. He hasn't even imposed them, at least not to the degree I thought he would. And now we're seeing a lot of uncertainty. I would love to see the Democrats step up and say, yeah, we should have tariffs, but you're doing it in a stupid way and you're not even doing it at all. And if you elect us, if people elect us, we will use tariffs to bolster American manufacturing and American wages. But they don't say that. So I don't know why I should trust them any more than I should trust, or distrust Trump, which I do distrust, of course.
Yeah, I know you're very much a proponent of tariffs, but I think a lot of people are saying, tariffs are a tax on the American people, and it's going to cost the average American money whenever there's tariffs. So, there's obviously some back and forth how people feel.
Well, it'll cost more. Yeah, goods cost more when you raise the cost of bringing an imported good into this country. The price will go up. That's the way supply and demand curves work. But the benefit is it incentivizes the manufacturing and production in this country, which is a tremendous benefit when we run huge deficits.
Well, when is that going to happen? That's the thing. Right now things are pretty bad, and maybe in the long term there might be some advantage to these tariffs. But I think in the short term, people don't like it. The stock market doesn't like it, and politicians don't like it. So we'll see.
I don't. To me, if a stockbroker or CEO or a politician is unhappy, that's probably a good reason to think the policy may be a good one, maybe beneficial. So this is Brian Tyler Cohen, an incredibly popular podcaster with an enormous subscriber base of close to 4 million people. And he's taking advantage of the market collapse here, or crash, whatever it is. He might have been Sleepy Joe, but he kept you sleeping peacefully when it came to your 401k. So I assume you kind of endorse that, Arlen. Is that right?
Oh, of course. Yeah. People right now are starting to panic a bit and wondering, does Trump have any idea what he's really doing? And Elon Musk is just decimating our government and, causing so many changes and so many things that are really bad for our government, as far as, what services and everything else. So, and he's also, Elon Musk is saying really some crazy things like anti-Social Security, anti-Medicare, and he doesn't he wants to get rid of those things. The American people will not stand for that, I don't think.
Well, I agree with you on the Social Security, the Medicare. Short-term vicissitudes in the stock market aren't that, I don't think, crucially important. And I think it's a bit of a privileged argument to say this. I think you're not reading the room very well. So many Americans don't have 401ks. So many Americans don't have retirement plans. Their retirement plan is the lottery. And when somebody who has millions, like Brian Tyler Cohen, millions of subscribers, but also, according to this website, however accurate it is, I have no idea. I assume it's vastly understating this guy's net worth. They say somewhere between 1 and 7 million. But he does have 4 million subscribers. That is true, according to YouTube. Right. And my very, very rough calculations that I've read that I think are somewhat true is that for every 1 million subscribers you have, that translates to about $100,000 in annual income, which is not so much. You think it's a lot, but so few people have 1 million subscribers. Virtually none do. And $100,000 is about a upper middle class income today. But if he has 4 million subscribers, he does. He's probably making at a minimum, and I bet he makes a lot more, half of 400 to 500,000 a year. You make 400 to 500,000 a year. This guy's in his 40s now, I believe. He's got to be worth more than 1 to 7 million, I believe. That said, he's in rarefied air. He's far above most Americans. If he's at the upper end of that net worth, he's in the 1% of net worth. This is not where most Americans find ourselves. And the fact that, a few elites don't like their 401k values dropping, I don't think most Americans care. Or if anything, they're happy. They're like, now you can feel a little bit of the pain that I've been feeling for 40 years because of the policies that Washington elites have imposed.
Yeah, I think the middle class does have, a lot of their money in 401ks, 403bs and all that in the stock market. And obviously they can see that going down. Now, it's true that the average American does not have money in the stock market. In fact, quite a bit. I don't know what the latest percentage is, can't live more than paycheck to paycheck. I mean, if they have one bad illness or one bad financial setback, they're ruined. And so that's just the way the country is now. And that's one reason that the Democrats were voted out. But I think enough people have money into their retirement accounts in the stock market that they can't help but see their money going down, and they're not going to like it.
No, I'm not denying that. I see 1/3 of Americans have 401ks. I don't deny that, but I just, it's not great if you lose 10%. You go from, if you have $40,000, you go down to 36,000. Obviously, you're not feeling good about that, but you know that you can't survive for very long on either 40,000 or 36,000. Americans need, and this is what Trump is doing, whether you like it or not, and I dislike most of it. It is bold. It's a change. Americans have seen themselves steadily, most Americans, working class and middle class Americans, have steadily seen their security eroded under Republican and Democratic administrations. They have seen their economic status decline. They have found life to be more and more challenging. And Trump is saying, hey, I'm going to shake this whole system up. One ramification now is the stock market crash or drop. I guess it's not really a crash yet. And that, is a problem for people. I get it. But in the end, if the tariffs are imposed and they do generate more manufacturing, which they will if they're imposed in this country, that will benefit American workers.
Well, I don't know how long it's going to take for that to happen. Right now, there's no indication that whatever Trump's doing has been very successful. I mean, people are losing money. Inflation is going way up, and that's got to scare people. I mean, when you go to the grocery store and see the prices you're going to have to spend for eggs and everything else, that's going to hurt your income too. So I think there's going to be a bit of a panic here when people realize that Elon Musk doesn't know what he's doing. Trump really doesn't know what he's doing. And, I predict things are going to get a lot worse, but we'll see.
Well, they may. And this is an opportunity for Democrats. I don't disagree with it. But the opportunity is for the Democrats to step up and say, we have to right now use government to protect the American people. We need to make sure that there's sufficient groceries in the stores and prices are low enough for the average American to pay for them. We're going to have to raise taxes on the wealthy, on the elites. We're going to have to make sure government has the resources capable of protecting Americans. And at the same time, we have to stop burning all this money in foreign wars. That's what the Democrats need to do. They're not doing it. So we're again stuck. We have no good options, Arlen.
Well, yeah, you're right. All those things Democrats should be talking about. But also the other side of the coin is they have no power. They have no power in Congress. They have no power in the executive, in the judicial branches. They got the courts against them. They really don't have any clout, any power at all to do anything, really. But they should be talking about what they would like to do, what they should do, so that, I guess their next chance will be the midterm elections in 2026. But that's a long way away. But
well, do you really think they have no power? I mean, Bernie is in Michigan, and I'm not necessarily a big fan of Sanders, and I think he should be using his clout to lead people away from the Democratic Party, but clearly he's able to generate enormous crowds. 10,000 people come see him in Michigan. Apparently AOC is generating a lot of numbers as well. So they're people in the streets as a result of what they're saying. They have power. They're keeping Republicans from going to town halls. There's only a tiny sliver of a majority but that Republicans hold in the House. So I'm not sure I accept that they have no power by speaking out, by calling for radical change. they can put pressure, real pressure, on Republican lawmakers.
Well, now's the time to do it because the way conditions are now, people might start listening to what the Democrats have to say. But I think the key here is the Republicans. Republicans have gone along with everything Trump has done. There's been no defections from the Republicans. They're all scared of Trump. And, if he starts losing popularity, maybe they won't be so scared. So, the Republicans, haven't done anything in response to what Trump is doing, anything that would prevent him from doing all the horrible things that Elon Musk is doing and so on. So you got to watch the Republicans. If Republicans start breaking away from the Trump policy, then you'll know something's going on for sure.
Yeah, I have so little faith or hope that Republicans will do the right thing that I don't, I have no expectations of them except that they're going to do the wrong thing. But sadly, I don't have much expectations of Dems either. So that's why I'm calling for alternatives. So speaking of really bad things that Trump has done, this is something that I think is just absolutely horrific, is arresting Mahmoud Khalil. He was a Palestinian graduate student at Columbia University. He had apparently led or participated in various rallies against Israel and against Columbia University's support for Israel. He was arrested. He was disappeared. Nobody's quite sure where he is. Apparently, some said, I think, North Carolina. Then there was talk he was in Louisiana. We had unfortunately, a small protest yesterday in the streets of D.C. I took that picture so I can prove I was there. And I have a Twitter of one of the organizers walking down the street shouting, but I'm not going to play that. I don't think there's any need. Arlen, some Democrats have actually, I'm so critical of Democrats all the time, but I want to just give props real quick. I guess to the Senate Judiciary Committee, because like I said, I'm always after them. I always think they do the wrong thing. I never feel like they're standing up and fighting battles they should fight. But Medea Benjamin, who is the chair, I guess, I don't know what her title is, the head of Code Pink, tweeted this out. I'm amazed Senate Democrats on the Judiciary Committee have actually taken a stand for Mahmoud Khalil. This is great. They should take a stand against genocide. And there you go. Senate Judiciary Democrats tweeting out yesterday, free Mahmoud Khalil. They're getting a lot of criticism for that. I give them a lot of credit. The New Republic, though, pointing out only 4 Democrats signed Mahmoud Khalil letter as everyone else cowers.
Yeah.
Your reaction to all of this?
Well, we're supposed to have free speech in this country. And Trump has said all along that anybody that protests against Israel on the campuses, they're going to, deport them or whatever. And he's the first one, I think, that's going to, have that problem. And there's just no justification for it, no legal justification. It's totally against, the First Amendment. And he has a status that he should be able to stay in this country. I think he's married to an American. And, this is hard to justify that they would take him away and threaten to deport him. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's no justification of which I'm aware. They have not even identified any crime. I don't believe there's a bill of particulars or any charges preferred. He just I'll put it on the screen. I also want to give one of a columnist I don't particularly like, but you do seem to favor, at least on occasion. Michelle Goldberg has really gone after Trump for this, so she deserves credit as well. Here's what Trump actually had to say, and again, there's just no basis for this. This is true fascism. We are supposedly entitled to due process. Government can't just make you disappear. You're entitled to a hearing to know what the charges against you are. Now, yes, you can be deported. I understand that argument, but as a permanent resident, Khalil has significantly greater rights than he would if he was just here on a student visa. So Trump says ICE proudly apprehended and detained Khalil. This is the first arrest of many to come, and his activities that are described as justifying the arrest are he engaged in pro-terrorist, anti-Semitic, anti-American activity. So nothing, as I understand it, is illegal. He didn't engage in terrorism. Trump doesn't say he engaged in terrorism. That would be illegal. There's no charge that he did. He didn't actually do anything anti-Semitic of which I'm aware. But even so, we do, as you said, have freedom of speech. And there's certainly nor did he do anything anti-American, whatever that even means. It's not a crime.
If he did some kind of terrorist act, if he destroyed something or did something that's obviously illegal and criminal, that would be one thing. But he's basically led people in free speech, and that's his only crime right now. He's just led some protests, and you don't take people away for that reason. I mean, that's just un-American.
It's horrible. It's really, really frightening. It's a terrible miscarriage of justice. It is fascistic. There's no way to defend any of that, and I'm appalled by it. I fear though, Arlen, that this is an issue. Well, the Democrats aren't going to make much hay of, but I will acknowledge I don't know how popular an issue it is. Americans aren't going to care that much about one Palestinian man, even if they recognize there's injustice there. Of course, this has cost the Democratic Party a lot of support, their unwavering backing of Israel. And this could be an area where they step back a little bit from the Zionist lobby, but I don't know that they would get much play for doing that.
Yeah, I mean, one person is not going to, change a lot. One person illegally or immorally being taken away, but when it starts, escalating, and you get a lot of that, a lot of protesters getting in that kind of situation, then you're going to have some real trouble. And there's, and the Trump administration has been breaking all kinds of rules and constitutional laws. And, they're pretty much lawless in a lot of ways. So, the things that Elon Musk is doing, that's
well, it is true. I think that's fair. This certainly seems to be lawless, in my opinion, and it's the worst, the worst violations that I'm seeing by this administration have been in this kind of individual rights area, whether it was locking up immigrants or, in this case, he's not an immigrant, but locking up somebody for exercising free speech is terrifying.
There's no defense of what they're doing to him. I mean, there just isn't. And Trump has promised to do more. If he does more, then we're going to have more and more problems. So I don't know, but that certainly looks bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. By the way, there you go. Subscribe now, please, if you haven't yet done so. We'll also ask you to join us on Halitics. Where it gets heated, Arlen, I don't know if you feel like it's been a little too, I'm really trying to police it there. I want it to be a welcome environment, but it's very, very difficult. People, and not you, but there's a lot of over-the-top rhetoric, and I just do what I can to keep it as I guess, welcoming and, not as safe as I can, but it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I've told you about 60 Minutes did a program a couple of weeks ago where they showed what Germany is doing, and Germany is cracking down really hard on hate speech and lies and all that kind of thing, and that's doesn't quite go well with our First Amendment right of free speech. But look what's going on in the country. You're having all kinds of hateful things and going on all over the internet, and people are getting more violent. And I think part of the problem is that people aren't given their real names. Before, in the old days, you used to write a letter to the editor and you had to have your name and town. But now anybody can say anything they want, and we don't know who they are. So I think, that's something that I think is hurting this country in a lot of ways and causing a lot of distrust and hate and, all the problems that we're having with a divided country.
Well, I think that's a very fair point. Arlen Grossman with us on Halitics. It is a Tuesday with Arlen, and we're just kind of going through a bunch of stories. We're talking about free speech and how obviously the Trump administration honors it far more in the breach than in reality. How does that saying go? It's honored in the breach, but not I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But meaning that they say that they believe in free speech, but then when push comes to shove, they certainly don't observe that constitutional requirement that government not punish speech. The issue, though, it's very tough because how do we ever decide what terrain? Now, there are some examples in this article. You said 60 Minutes overtime. Germany is prosecuting online trolls. Here's how the country is fighting hate speech on the internet. I thought this was Arlen, a pretty, let me see if I can get it. I thought this was an example of something that, well, first we'll get to the actual verbiage from the article, because it was kind of, thought it was a little bit absurd, actually. So if you read this, as prosecutors explain it, the German constitution protects free speech, but not hate speech. And that's where it gets tricky. Well, obviously, and then this guy Fink says, the prosecutor, you have free speech, but it has its limits. Well, how is it free if it's limits, right? I mean, you're not free if you have to run up against limits, against guardrails.
Well, of course, Al, we do have a First Amendment that protects free speech, but there are also some limits to it. You can't yell, fire in a crowded theater is, the most obvious one. But, I think at this point, as much as I love free speech and I've been a supporter of free speech, I'm starting to think that maybe there has to be limits on it. When people are just automatically, telling lies and making things up and throwing out all kinds of misinformation. And then you have the, artificial intelligence, and they're putting things, on the internet that aren't real. I mean, I think the government needs to have some limits. And
well, in the case of Khalil, the government, Trump is saying, hey, he's inciting a riot. It's anti-Semitic. They hate Jews. So yeah, we can arrest him. So how would you respond? How would you distinguish the case of Khalil from, I don't know, give me an example of someone you think, well, here's one I think we can probably agree should be illegal. And this is from Germany. In one case, an online post suggested that refugee children should play in electric wires. I have no problem with a penalty for that. But I don't see that as the kind of speech that we should protect. But I would ask you, Arlen, how would you distinguish between suggesting refugee children should play in electric wires and Mahmoud Khalil should be allowed to speak out on the campus of Columbia University without fear of prosecution?
Yeah, it's a very difficult issue, Al. We know that. And then all along recently, the Trump administration has been saying, we're all for free speech. And so they're getting rid of, references to DEI and references to gender all over the government. And, that's they're limiting free speech in that way. And, I think it's going to take some very intelligent people, independent people maybe who, come up with something like that, like they do in Germany. I think it's necessary because I think the level of speech in this country has just gotten out of hand as far as hate and lies and all that kind of thing. So I think.
Well, how about we try to come up with a line? It may not be a super bright line. It may be fuzzy on the edges, but I'll give you why I think this should not be allowed and Khalil's speech should be protected. With Khalil, it relates to politics. It relates to policy, what this country should or shouldn't do. He's saying, hey, we shouldn't be supporting genocide. Columbia University, the school I attend, should not be in the business of helping Israel kill Palestinians, which is what it's doing. That's what he said, and he could justify it. It was true, And he wasn't inciting hatred, riot. He wasn't like saying fire in a crowded theater, although you can, I believe, say fire in a crowded theater if there is a fire. You just can't if there isn't. But the truth is an absolute defense. Now, you may be smart about it. You might like whisper and say, hey, let's slowly file out of here rather than start a stampede. That might make sense. But I believe it's only illegal to shout fire if there's no fire. So here, this is like shouting fire. This kind of comment, refugee children should play in electrical wires, is calling for violence against people, innocent people. It seems very, very different to me, and I think it can be shown to be different.
Yeah.
Versus what Khalil did. And if the Post had said, hey, there are too many refugees in Germany and they're taking jobs from good German folk and we need jobs for Germans and they're using up our precious resources, I'd be like, well, I don't like it, but I'm not going to ban that. But this is a little different.
I think hate speech is one that I come to when I think about it. When people, say that this race or that gender or that culture, is awful and we should, get rid of them and say even worse things about them. I think, when somebody can't really change who they are, or if they were born with a certain color or a certain religion or whatever, I don't see the justification in, attacking them. So I think there has to be limits on hate speech. I mean, when somebody, says, let's march in a Jewish community about the Holocaust and how, that it never really happened and all those kind of things. I think there might be a way to draw a line and say, hey, this is too much. You've gone too far.
Well, even that to me isn't as ugly as the post that says refugee children should play in electrical wires. Marching in a community of Holocaust survivors, although there aren't many left because pretty much they're all dead by now, but that's bad. I'm not saying it's good, but it's not overtly calling for their death.
Yeah, but
unless you are, that's different. And I would say that would probably be something I wouldn't allow. But in this case, what you are doing is you're saying children should be killed, right? They should play in electrical wires. That is, to me, the definition of hatred, of violence, and we shouldn't allow it. I don't know that marching in a community of Holocaust survivors is quite the same.
All I'm saying is,
and then you always have the slippery slope because the many Jewish people are claiming, and I guess they're sincere. They're wrong, but they're sincere that what Khalil was doing at Columbia was hate speech. It was hatred against Jews.
Well, I'm sure Trump has that policy for political reasons that, you're not allowed to, say bad things about, Israel and all that kind of thing. But I think the problem with hate speech is it stirs people up. You start, attacking a certain race or religion or gender or whatever, and it stirs people up. And that's when violence happens often, it's a secondary, part of that. Here, all that hate speech will build up, and then you have problems. So I think we really need to look at that and come up with some rules, some ideas that what limits we can put, if there's any, on free speech.
All right, Arlen Grossman with us on Halitics. It is a Tuesday with Arlen, and you did. Point out, certainly there was a New York Times article criticizing Trump for his, for just their dishonesty, the whole administration, their hypocrisy when it comes to free speech, saying they support free speech when in many examples they don't. I just want to go into this very, very briefly. I want to get to the Michelle Goldberg piece as well that you referenced, Arlen. But I thought some of their examples are good fodder to criticize Trump, to say, if you're a Democrat, his policies are terrible. But I'm not sure that they're necessarily exactly invariably, or all of his examples, the way Khalil, right? I mean, this is someone you're punishing because they spoke out against Israel and against the United States policy and against the university's policy towards Israel. That is clearly a clear violation of the right to free speech. He's being punished for what he said.
Absolutely.
I'm not so sure some of these Times examples really meet that definition. For example, stripping federal websites of any hint of undesirable words and thoughts, is that really, who's being punished? That's not really, I don't think, a violation of free speech. It's true the government website isn't saying what it said before, but is that really a violation of free speech?
I think it's the hypocrisy of it, Hal. They're saying, oh, free speech is real important and we're allowing a lot of free speech. But here's what Michelle Goldberg is saying. In the distorted view of the Trump administration, protecting free speech requires controlling free speech, banning words, phrases, and ideas that challenge or complicate government-favored speech. And officials in Washington that spent the last month stripping federal websites of any hint of undesirable words or thoughts. So that's what the government is doing. And,
well, I don't think they should strip my website or my videos, but it is a government website. They were elected to lead our country. Don't they get to decide what's on the federal websites?
Well, not to the extent that they're doing it, I think. They're just they're out of control, really, I think. And then they're just trying to change the thoughts of this country, into, not even thinking about things like equality and gender and diversity and all those things. I think, they're trying to push that on the American people, and they're not being honest. They're not being fair, I don't think.
So I think a lot of what you're saying is right. I don't think it's even arguable, Arlen. This is a bad administration. These are bad leaders. These are people who are grifters and using government to profit themselves at the expense of everyone else. They're dishonest. These are bad. Trump is, certainly in some ways worse when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, because he is now punishing people directly who speak out against it, which is a terrible, terrible thing. So these are really bad people. And we talked a little bit about the Democratic response. I frankly find it in many cases absolutely appalling, and justifying therefore my refusal to even be part of this party or associate with it. I have a clip here of your governor, Gavin Newsom here. This is his episode, by the way. He didn't go on Charlie Kirk's program. He invited Charlie Kirk, who is a well-known right-wing provocateur. I don't want to get into putting a lot of words in his mouth, but he, certainly is a staunch believer in a kind of crony or ruthless capitalism, winner take all, has never shown the least bit of concern for poor, struggling, and working people. That's who Gavin Newsom invites for episode 1.
Well, give him credit.
Have you have not seen this or heard of this?
No, I have not seen it, but
let me play. This is where they talk about the trans issue particularly. So he's saying it's unfair for trans women and girls to compete in sports against biological women and girls. He's saying, you're right, it's unfair. Let me just keep playing it, but I just jumped in the middle because there was so much before and after, and I didn't want to clutter everything up.
I agree with his position.
So I want to stop that, because I actually was fine with that answer. He's getting a lot of criticism for it, but I think he's right. It's not fair, I think, on balance. You have to draw a line. You have to say, well, these people get to compete against girls and women and these don't. This is how we draw the line. I'm okay with that. But then he does start talking about compassion and fairness, which I liked, Arlen.
I'm happy and I'm glad to see him do that. And I agree with him. So, in the past, I would think he would just go along with everything the Democrats and all the diverse groups, identity type groups are talking about. But now he's kind of breaking away a little bit. And I think it's a smart move for him. So we'll see.
Well, I can't disagree with that, but I'm going to have quite a bit of choice words for the governor shortly. But and I don't want people to think I won't. But in this one segment, I can't really point fingers yet. See, I wouldn't have said that. Why does he think Charlie Kirk is decent? I've never seen that guy fight for, again, poor, struggling, working Americans. But that's a politician for you. So, okay, yeah, whatever.
He's trying to be nice.
So this is like, I stress tested it. So he's going to go into how he talked to, and I'm going to jump away from that. But Arlen, this is so typical Gavin Newsom, where he even acknowledges, oh, I talked to a lot of people and they all felt the same way. It's like, just if you believe it, you believe it. But he has to decide whether it's going to poll well before he'll take a particular position.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom. He's kind of sleazy in a lot of ways, and that's certainly not one of my favorite people. And usually he toes the line on the typical Democratic positions. But the fact that he's willing to buck that and change, go in a different direction, I think speaks well of him, at least in this particular case.
Well, I think it's low-hanging fruit, though, isn't it? I mean, there aren't a lot of trans people. They're not popular. This is an issue that, let's face it, the trans activists who are all in for trans athletes being allowed to compete against girls and women, they're wrong. I mean, that's an issue where I think that we can say they're wrong. So it's really low-hanging fruit. And that's why I don't give him any real credit for this. But let me play a little more. I'm going to give him a tiny bit, but very little. It's not bold of him. It's not brave. It's like he's saying, oh, yeah, look, I'm standing up to who? Some trans people? It's the old punching a hippie type situation, as far as I can tell.
Well, he the whole thing about trans in women's sports and all that trans is sort of everybody. It's common sense. People understand that, know that, and the polls point that out, and it probably hurt the Democrats in the last election. So he's making a move in the other direction, trying to be a little bit different. And we'll see if he does any other changes to the typical Democratic point of view.
It's a pretty de minimis issue too, but it's relevant. I don't want to make too light of this. I do believe the Democrats who support, and those of whatever party who support trans athletes competing in girls and women's sports, I think they're just wrong. I don't see this as, but I also think we have to be very, very supportive of the trans community and their emotional challenges, and also provide athletic competitions that they can people are saying, well, they're saying no, trans athletes can't participate in sports. No, that's not what we're saying. We have to be very, very clear. They can participate, but they just can't participate against girls and girls only and women only sports. That would be my argument. But let me play a little more, because I really want to get into why I feel that Gavin Newsom is so problematic as a Democratic standard bearer. Now, I think on the issue regarding trans people, I agree with him. But now it's like, oh, these homeless people, the quality of life that Charlie Kirk is talking about, it isn't how there are homeless people. It isn't how awful it must be to not have a place to put your head at night. It's that, oh, those dirty, slobby, homeless people are messing it all up for the rest of us. And Gavin Newsom is totally agreeing with that. So now he's saying, well, you had some Chinese guy come into town and you cleaned him up. You cleaned up all those homeless. You got him out of San Francisco. Why can't you do that for the rest of us? I have a huge problem with this, Arlen. He should be speaking out against the injustice of our economy that leaves so many people without a place to live.
Like I said, Hal, I'm not a fan of Gavin Newsom. I think he is kind of sleazy and opportunist. But if he's willing to start making some breaks with previous positions and going against, the standard Democratic line, at least I would like to see more of it and see if it continues.
On this 1 hour plus podcast where he invited Kirk, it's Gavin Newsom's podcast. He's the producer. It's not Kirk. He doesn't mention once. And I looked through I went through the whole transcript. no mention of health care, no mention of Medicare for all, no mention of Gaza, Israel, no mention of inequality, which is off the charts in California, no mention of labor unions, lots of talk about how bad wokeism, no talk about the climate holocaust, which is very, very bad for California. I mean, we saw it in those wildfires, for example, the fires down in LA, among other places. So he's not really going against, you're saying if he's willing to take on his party, but he's not really taking, he's certainly not taking on the elites in his party, the billionaires who control the party. It's a very controlled challenge to the party on a very easy issue that doesn't gore anybody's ox that he cares about.
Well, maybe it's a little bit of hope, and we have to just wait and see, where he's going with all this. I mean, he's got to see that the Democratic field for president is wide open, and he's, an obvious candidate because he's so good looking and so, smart, and he's governor of the biggest state in the union and all that. But it's going to take time. Yeah, up to now, I'm not impressed with him, but I'll give him a chance.
All right, Arlen, I did have another article, but I'm not going to get to it. That was Why Aren't the Democrats Doing Anything by Dave Zirin. I may get to it tomorrow, but we still have a little time. So I want to give it to you in a couple ways. First, I'll ask you a question. Then if you have another article, I may have missed one that you recommended. But first, the question to you is, you said you're not really impressed with Gavin Newsom. You don't love Gavin Newsom. Is there a Democrat that you do really favor to run for president in 2028, or anybody? It doesn't have to be a Democrat.
No, I actually haven't seen anybody, Hal, at the moment. But there's a lot of time between now and 2028, and so I'm sure there's good Democrats out there. I don't see why there wouldn't be. There's some good governors, but I haven't really, focused on that as far as a presidential candidate, but I'm sure there's a lot of good Democrats throughout the country that could, make a difference and possibly run for president.
But no one name or two or three jump out at you. Let me give you a couple of names and see what your reaction is. John Fetterman has been touted as a potential presidential candidate by CNN, among other outlets.
Yeah, Bill Maher said a lot of positive things about him, and I don't know him that well, but if he's obviously somebody who thinks for himself, and he's not afraid to, wear lousy clothes or whatever. He's not looking for image. So I'd certainly look at him and see what his policies are on a lot of issues. Yeah.
Well, he's mainly distinguished himself by championing completely Israel. He has been very, very clear that he opposes any limits on Israel, any criticism of Israel. The Democratic Party is completely wrong, according to him, for having suggested Israel was doing anything it shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, that's kind of what Bill Maher thinks too, and I'm not happy about that. I'd like to see him change his position on that.
It seemed to me that would be a pretty good argument against him for being the president, right? I mean, if that's the view you're going to take, I would argue you shouldn't be president. What about? Let me give you some other names, Arlen. Right. What about? Let me see if I can get rid of that. AOC.
Yeah, I think she would be a little bit too extreme at this time. I think that would be very risky for the Democratic Party, and I can't imagine them supporting her. I'll tell you one person I really like for what he says and the way he comes across is, of course, Pete Buttigieg. But obviously, the fact that he's gay could be a problem. So you have to look at that.
I'm interested in how you reacted to AOC by saying she might be too extreme. Wouldn't that be an argument, or couldn't you make an argument? I would, not that I like AOC particularly, but I would argue that the Democratic Party is where it is in large part because it plays it safe. It played it safe in 2016 with Hillary and lost. It played it safe in 2024 with Kamala and lost. So wouldn't it make sense to look at that record and say we should go, maybe roll the dice, go with someone who's a little more, at least compared to other Washingtonian figures, other Washington politicians, who's a little bolder than the norm?
Yeah, I would be very happy to see her as president of the United States. But, I'm different than the average voter, and the average voter is going to look at her suspiciously. There's lots of, negative press about her. And, the other side is, trying to punish her and make her into an evil person. So it would be tough for her. But yeah, she comes across well. She's got some good ideas, and if it was up to me, I would say yes. But I don't think the average voter would.
But your concern is she would politically face a challenge against any Republican, that there might be a more moderate or centrist Dem. All right, let me give you another name, Arlen. Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz.
Yeah, I think he came across fairly well, but he's not exciting. He doesn't get people really all excited about what he's talking about. He's very level-headed, and I just don't see him as getting a lot of people to get real excited about him. So I don't know.
Well, I'll just throw my name I'll throw my name in. Of course, if people want to draft Hal for president, I'll consider it. But of those names, I actually think Tim Walz, and I'm very much opposed to the Democratic Party at this point. I think it's a force for ill. But I think Tim Walz is an interesting character who did some pretty progressive things. Some areas I disagree with him, not great necessarily. But and he was kind of trying to push Harris to be more populist, which may be a big reason he was sidelined in favor of people like Liz Cheney. So yeah. I would look closely at Tim Walz if he were running.
Well, he's done some good things for his state, Minnesota. He's, giving lunch programs, and his positions are good. I can't help but think about the one problem he had was putting, I think, tampons in boys' bathrooms. That's not going to help him.
I think that is pretty minimal. I really think the American public is more concerned, honestly, about just being able to survive until their next paycheck. I don't think they care very much about tampons. And I think he would be able to make the argument that he did a lot of things in Minnesota that made life just a little bit better for working people. So yeah. Those identity issues. Now, people might say, well, Hal, if that's how you feel, why are you critical of the trans movement to allow or to maintain the presence of trans girls and women in girls and women's sports? I say, well, that is a pocketbook issue. When they compete against girls and women, they're actually taking spaces on varsity teams and sometimes in rare cases scholarships. So I don't really see it as completely divorced from economics. I think there is a connection. But that said, yes, Democrats should be fighting to guarantee every single American debt-free education. That should be part of it. And the transphobia would go away to a degree. People are always going to fear the other, someone who's different. But there'd be less transphobia if there was less raw competition for the few resources that trickle down to poor, struggling, working class Americans.
Yeah, there's very few trans people who are causing problems. As far as even in sports, there's just a very small handful. But I think it's just common sense, Hal. I think anybody with any brain can see that men shouldn't be playing in women's sports because men have a biological advantage. So,
well, I think the argument would be they're not men, they're women, but they're biologically male, and is my answer, and they have advantages. And males are naturally bigger, stronger. Now, you could argue, well, but when you take the hormone blockers and you take this and you take that, and my answer to that is, okay, but two problems with that. One, even with all of that, if a trans athlete makes a female team, a girls or women's team, they're still taking the space of a biological girl or woman. You could say it's not unfair, but they're still they're still occupying physically a space that was originally, I think, designed or is designed for females. That's point one. Point two is, if you're concerned about all the intrusion, right? We don't want to have tests, and we don't want to have people in the bathrooms looking to see what your genitalia are. I'd say nothing is more intrusive than all those hormone tests. Well, are you taking your medication? Are you, did you have your blockers? Are you, so you gotta draw a line. There has to be a line. And to me, the line would be, what were you conceived as? And I understand even there, it's not always totally clear, because there are intersex people, and some folks are both, or neither. So
the bottom line is, it's a bad position for Democrats to run on. They can't win, and they should steer clear of it as much as they possibly can.
Do you think, Arlen, that there could be a truly progressive populist Democrat? Do you think that can happen at this point, or are we past that?
Well, I think you and I are in agreement that that would be a nice thing. I'd like to see a progressive candidate. I just don't know if this country is, ready for it. And, especially with the media being the way it is, somebody who is progressive would be attacked so mercilessly,
or unmercifully.
Somebody like Tim Walz is more moderate, middle of the road, and he would probably have a better chance, I think, of getting the most votes.
Well, you kind of rephrase the question to suit your answer, which I like. I mean, that's smart. But let me sort of reframe it again. Do you think the Democratic Party establishment, the Hakeem Jeffries, the Chuck Schumers, the Barack Obamas, the Ken Martins, would they allow a true progressive populist Democrat to come to the fore?
Well, I would have my doubts, because, based on Bernie Sanders and other candidates, they don't really want somebody like that. And then, I bring up every week how, our political system is so weighed in favor of the rich and the corporations, and you can't ignore that, unless we make some changes in how our elections are done, and how much money can be put into politics. And with the inequality as bad as it is in this country, wealth inequality, you can't ignore those things.
Yeah, I, like you, I'm very, very pessimistic. I mean, that's how I read what you just said, Arlen. It's very disheartening. You mentioned AOC. I mean, I think the argument for I mentioned her. I think the argument for AOC is, sure, she's defended bad Democrats like Kamala. Sure, she's lied about them. Sure, she's repeatedly defended the party. But ultimately, she really is a believer in workers. She is a believer in equality. And therefore, if we elected her, she would govern better than her rhetoric has been in recent years. I don't know that that's untrue. It may be the case, but it's so frustrating and angering that you have to take these people on faith. You can't just believe what they tell you that they'll do, or that because they are dishonest, because they protect a party that is ultimately not our ally.
Yeah, well, that's very typical of all politicians. It's really hard to get away from that. You're not going to hear a lot of honesty and realism from politicians. But if AOC was thinking of running for president, I would be very happy to give her money to work for her or whatever, because I think she would be great. But I don't know if this country is ready for her.
I think the Bernie experience is so disappointing, because he was pretty darn honest. He wasn't perfect, but he was a lot more honest. As you say, most politicians are not. He really was pretty true. He was a pretty close to a truth teller in 2016.
Yeah.
And that was a great opportunity that was lost, Arlen.
Yeah, he was a hero of mine, Bernie Sanders. I've watched his whole career in Vermont, and he's terrific. And then right now he's going across the country, barnstorming, whatever you call it. He's drawing big crowds in a lot of cities. So there you go. So he's good, but of course he's now in his 80s, so it's just not realistic for him to run for president.
And I fear we're not going to get another Bernie Sanders, because he was elected in a very small state, kind of a race that was under the radar. In some ways, he ran actually as a more conservative Democrat, at least on gun issues. He was not a gun rights. He was somewhat of a gun rights guy. I think he was endorsed by the NRA one time. It'd be very, very difficult for someone who's as committed to progressive populism, I think, to get to where he is, now.
I think AOC would be the logical person who could, take over for Bernie, but it's a different story, and we just don't know at this point.
Yeah, I don't think she's been quite as trustworthy and as honest as he's been, and he's disappointed as well. That's just my take. Arlen, before I let you go, you got anything else? Did I miss a story you wanted to get to? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think of course, there's what's going on in foreign policy with Ukraine and Trump seeming to be on Putin's side now. That's a big issue, but we don't have time to talk about
that. Well, we explored that in great detail last Monday, Arlen. I believe it was Monday, or maybe it was Tuesday, whichever was the last time you were on the program. We had quite a heated discussion about Ukraine and Trump's policy towards Ukraine.
And what I heard this morning on the news was that Ukraine has lobbed a lot of drones over to Russia and has made some good hits. And of course, Russia is going on the offensive also. So now is the time we really need people to get together and come up with a peace plan. It's really important.
Well, I hope Trump is up for that. That's one area where he has been less awful, in my opinion. Arlen, thanks again. Great to talk to you. I don't know if I'll be on next week. I let Arlen know that I may well be visiting California next week. That's the plan. Actually, I will be. I'll be in California for most of next week. So I don't plan to be doing a podcast then, but I will be on until the end of this week. So everyone enjoy the rest of the week on Halitics, and then we'll see what we see.
Sounds good. Thanks, Hal.
Thank you. Why am I not getting my... See, now this is... There we go.